Helen didn't cry at her son's funeral. She didn't tremble, didn't collapse. She sat perfectly upright in the second pew, a plain black dress hands folded around a crumpled service program. People whispered words like graceful and strong. Someone behind her leaned in and said, "She raised him on her own, you know. Remarkable woman." But Helen wasn't listening to any of it. She was still trying to breathe, not because of grief, but because of the words whispered into her ear just moments earlier. "You have 1 week to leave." No anger, no venom. Just a soft voice wrapped in concern delivered like comfort. But it wasn't. It was Jenna, her son's widow, dressed like grief was a role she'd rehearsed. A quiet threat disguised as sympathy. An eviction masked as kindness. And just like that, before the casket was even lowered, Helen was already being erased. She didn't turn to respond, didn't ask, "What did you say?" She just gripped the program tighter, eyes fixed on the altar, pretending the words hadn't been said. The priest spoke of peace, of closure, of letting go. But what exactly was she supposed to let go of? Her son. The only person who'd ever seen her, really seen her as more than a shadow in someone else's home. Daniel had died at 33. Sudden, no warning. Heart failure, they said. But it wasn't her son's heart that shattered the family. It was the quiet maneuvering left in his wake. Jenna rose from her seat, offering practiced smiles as she moved down the aisle. Guests murmured about her poise, her strength. Helen stayed seated, still, silent, not a single tear. But in her mind the words echoed louder than the church bells. 1 week. That's all Jenna had given her. Not time to grieve, not space to remember, just a deadline. Wrapped in black lace and fake condolences. Helen didn't ask questions, she didn't protest. After the funeral, she moved through the house like she always had, quietly, carefully, as if not to disturb the space her son used to fill. 7 years she'd lived there. Tucked away in the back room Daniel had insisted was hers. A space with a view of the garden close to the kitchen, far from the noise of the world. She'd never overstepped. She cooked. She folded laundry. She was in every sense invisible support. Never the center, just the frame. But something had changed. The photo on the stairwell was gone. The one of Daniel in his army uniform. His recliner missing. His favorite blanket stuffed behind the TV like something no one wanted to see. And his scent, that mix of aftershave and detergent, was fading fast. 3 days after the funeral, Helen opened her closet. Half her clothes were gone, neatly folded, labeled in boxes. One of them read in thick marker, "Helen, donate or store." Her nightstand drawer empty. The little jewelry box her son gave her years ago vanished. She bent down slow and steady to check under the bed. The plastic storage bin, her old documents, medical papers, bank records gone. Jenna didn't mention any of it. She smiled over coffee, updated her social media with quotes about grief, asked Helen if she wanted almond milk in her tea. Everything looked normal, but the house felt like it was shrinking around her. 1 drawer at a time. That evening, Helen sat in silence. The guest room, her room, was still technically hers, but the door creaked like it no longer belonged to her. The light switch clicked differently. She opened the Notes app on her phone. 2017, $10,000 cashier's check toward house down payment. 2019, paid for new washer. 2021, 3 months of insurance during Daniel's layoff. Each line a piece of her place in this house. A thread in the fabric Jenna was now trying to unpick. The next morning, Helen put on her nicest coat and walked to the edge of town. She didn't tell Jenna where she was going. The law office was small. Wood paneling, a faint scent of coffee and printer ink. The kind of place where time seemed slower. Mr. Holt remembered Daniel right away. Solid man, he said. Organized, careful with details. Helen told him everything. The whispered threat, the disappearing items, the box under the bed, and the receipt. His expression changed when she showed it to him. "If your name is on the deed and this contribution is documented, she can't legally remove you." He looked her in the eye. "This is a good start." When Helen returned home, Jenna was standing in the hallway on the phone. "No, she doesn't know anything," she was saying. "It's handled." Her voice dropped when she saw Helen. Helen said nothing. She simply placed her purse on the table, poured herself a cup of tea, and looked out the window. The house was quiet, but the walls were shifting, and Helen had finally started to notice. It started with a knock, just after noon. 3 sharp taps against the glass. Helen opened the door to find a courier. Young, polite, wearing the company's bright blue logo. He handed her an envelope, for Mrs. Helen Cooper. Inside, a set of papers, thick and official, and 1 sentence in bold. Voluntary transfer of ownership, effective immediately. Her hands shook. Jenna had filed a request claiming Helen was no longer capable of independent living, that she had emotionally consented to move out and had signed away her claim to the house. Only she hadn't. The signature on the bottom of page 3 wasn't hers. Helen sat down slowly. The floor felt unsteady. Her son's name appeared in a footnote, a trust account, a clause from years ago that gave her protection, but only if he was the one managing it. And now he was gone. Legally, the door had been left open, and Jenna had walked right through. Helen went to her bedroom. The closet was nearly empty now. One suitcase sat quietly in the corner, half-packed. Had Jenna planned this for months? She picked up her phone. The screen blinked. 3 missed calls from the law office. And a new voicemail. Mr. Holt's voice calm but urgent. Helen, I need you to come in. We found something in the original deed, something your son might have added before he passed. At the office, she sat across from Holt. He slid a manila folder across the table. Inside, a copy of the original agreement. Dated, notarized, and handwritten in Daniel's careful print. If my mother is alive and of sound mind, she shall remain in the home as long as she wishes. No transfer is valid without her written consent. A clause, buried deep in the fine print, signed and witnessed. Helen closed her eyes. Her son, quiet, thoughtful, Daniel had known, had prepared. The house was hers, not just in memory, not just in heart, but by law. That night, Jenna came home late, laughed at something on her phone, tossed her heels by the door. Helen was waiting at the kitchen table. The document sat beside a cup of chamomile tea. Jenna's smile faltered. What is this? Helen didn't raise her voice. A correction. Jenna reached for the paper, paused, read the handwriting. Daniel's handwriting? Her face drained of color. The silence that followed wasn't angry. It wasn't even cold. It was final. Helen stood up. For the first time in months, her back didn't ache. Her breath didn't catch. She was still grieving, still healing, but not lost. She reached for the tea and walked steady and slow toward her room. Outside, the porch light flickered on. Warm, familiar, home. But this time, it was hers. There was no celebration, no fireworks, no grand statement of victory. Just a quiet morning sunlight resting softly on Helen's porch, a cup of tea steaming in her hands and the sound of sparrows building a nest beneath the eaves. She had been forced to prove what should never have been questioned, that her presence mattered, that her voice still counted, that a woman, even one in her 60s, even one left behind, was not disposable. Some in town said she should have sued, pressed charges, fought fire with fire, but Helen chose something else. She planted tomatoes in the back again, opened the windows wide, let air back into rooms that had long held sorrow. She didn't just reclaim her house, she began to reclaim herself. Grief still lingered in the hallways, in the scent of her son's old jacket folded neatly in the closet, in the unopened piano he used to play late at night when the world felt too loud. But now grief had space to breathe, to soften, to pass through her instead of weighing her down. People began to notice. The pharmacist called her by name again. The neighbor's daughter came by for advice on baking. Even the mailman stopped to ask about her garden. Helen wasn't just back, she was seen. Not as someone to pity, not as someone who lost everything, but as a woman who stood up when she could have stayed silent, who chose grace when the world offered bitterness. It wasn't about the house, it never really was. It was about the right to exist in peace, to age with dignity, to live on your own terms even when the world wants to write your ending for you. So if you're watching this, and you've ever felt pushed aside, forgotten, or treated like a burden, remember Helen. And remember this, sometimes the most radical thing a woman can do is stay, stand, and say, this is mine. I'm not going anywhere.